Shana Tova. That was a little weak. Shana Tova. Much better. Last week I had the chance to talk about the pride we might feel as a community, to talk about the moment of transition we are in and the way we as a whole could be better, could continue the trajectory we're on. And this week I want to zoom in. I want to zoom into the individual, to look inside, to ask each of us as a person, what can or what could we be doing? And I was trying to be a little clever using the word Zoom, which I feel has been purchased wholeheartedly by whoever owns the company Zoom. And I want to talk for a second about this experience that, unless somehow you've been under a rock for the last 18 months, we've all had, which is the Zoom experience when you are in your box and there's a bunch of other boxes. One of the cool things that happens, in my opinion, is what's happening in the background. Now, some of you are clever enough to have like blurred or pretty backgrounds, but for many of us, our real life is happening behind us. I've tried in my home office to hang up a lot of my kids' artwork to add some color, but a lot of times what happens in the background isn't what you planned on. It's not the organized, sterile space that we try to create our meetings in. My favorite example of this, there's a YouTube you can Google after Yom Kippur of a newscaster. There's a bunch of, in fact, you can Google newscaster Zoom and you'll get a bunch of great videos. But there's one in particular, the guy is like holding his notes and is like very sternly delivering the news about something very serious. And while he's speaking, one at a time, his 3 kids appear behind him. Like the 3-year-old comes in and realizes he's not supposed to be, and the grin on his face is like, oh yeah. Then the 2-year-old comes in behind, and then in an exo-saucer, the like 18-month-old is like chugging along, and this guy's trying to keep a straight face. And then you see, I don't know if it's his wife or the nanny or whoever, careen around the corner into the room and like football hold both kids and like drag the 3rd kid along in the exo-saucer out of the room. It's hysterical. It's wonderful. And it highlights for me, I think, a truth about our pre-Zoom lives. The truth is that we are all living in a Zoom box. That in regular life, we all have stuff going on behind the scenes. We just don't have clear boundaries from one thing to the next. We're often better at hiding what's happening instead of sharing. And we miss what's happening in other people's Zoom boxes in their real lives. And I think that goes back to this moment 2,000 years ago that I spoke about last week. The temple is destroyed and the rabbis are trying to build something. And one of the amazing things that they realized is that there actually was a flaw with all of Judaism happening in the temple, because that left all of people's lives in regular time out of the equation. And Hillel, who really predates even the title rabbi, who is the rabbi's rabbi, has this teaching that is so simple and yet so hard to make real. He says, Al tifrosh min hatzibor. Don't separate yourself from the community. On the one hand, we're all like, yeah. After the last 18 months of isolation in one way, shape, or form, of course we want that connection. We want to feel like other people are part of our lives. But after you get past that surface level truth of the sentence, how you do it actually gets very hard and complicated pretty quickly. I think that what the Zoom teaches us, what that box reminds us, is that there are 2 things we need to do to make that tzibor, that community, a reality. We have to go into our own backgrounds and share a little truthfully, a little honestly, what's going on. And we have to take the time to look into other people's backgrounds and let their truth, their real life, be part of our own. I know that most of the time I have 3 ideas. Tonight is 2. I think we're going to be okay. If you want later, I'll come up with a 3rd. This idea of knowing ourselves and knowing others, of course, goes back to the rabbis as well. A few generations after Hillel was Rabban Gamliel. Now, Rabban Gamliel, you may hear, it sounds almost like rabbi, but it's not quite. The sound at the end, the nun, means that he wasn't just a rabbi, he was the chief rabbi. He was the head rabbi. He had the most authority and power. He was the head honcho of a group of people obsessed with hierarchy. And there's this story that his wife passes away, and the next day his students notice that he has bathed, which Rabban Gamliel himself had just taught is something you're not allowed to do when you're in Shiva. And his students say, Rabban Gamliel, you're the leader. How can you not follow the law that you have laid down? And he says the following, it is possibly the greatest line in all of rabbinic literature. He says, but I'm an istanis. Now, if you know what that is, bonus points to you. It is a Greek word that makes its way into Mishnaic Hebrew and early Aramaic. And it essentially means, I'm a wimp. He is saying, I'm too delicate. It's too hard for me. I am a person of importance and power. I can't go a whole week without taking a bath. Think about it. He is the guy establishing the rules that we have, the Judaism that we know. And when he is in the moment, he says, but I'm an istanis. What a lesson he taught his students. He doesn't say, and I'm right to do it. He says, I'm not strong enough to be as good as I'd like to be. What is the part of the background we need to share? It is exactly the moments when we are the istanis. The moments when we are vulnerable or broken. The moments that we want to hide are exactly the parts of ourselves that we have to share. Then there is the other side. How do we know the other? And for that, I first go back to the Tower of Babel. You may know the story that after the flood, the world starts to get repopulated and everybody speaks the same language. And together they go to build a tower. The rabbis tell us the tower's purpose was to challenge God. God likes to win, apparently. Destroys the tower and does something very interesting. God, for the last time in the Bible, changes the nature of reality. God does lots of miracles, splits seas, plagues, and other times when nature pauses. But the Tower of Babel is the last time God changes the nature of existence. God says from this point forward, each and every person will speak a different language. Now, on the surface, this is a nice sort of mythological explanation for different languages. But underneath, it bespeaks a real truth of our moment. Even though in this room we might speak English, each and every one of us, when it comes to the part of ourselves that is so important, that part is in a different language from every other person. And getting that part out and getting someone else to understand it is inherently and always a struggle. And every single time we miss the mark, and if you think I'm wrong, talk to someone who's been married 60 or more years and ask them the last time their spouse surprised them. Rabbi Akiva understands this truth. Rabbi Akiva is another famous of these early rabbis. His teachings are renowned. The stories about him are outstanding. And he is teaching his students about the nature of tzedakah, of charity. And he says, this is what charity means. If the wealthiest person in town who rides around always with a cart and a donkey falls on hard times and loses his cart and donkey, it's the community's job to raise enough money to buy another one for him. That's absurd. That would be like I said, one of our congregants during the hurricane, a tree fell on their Ferrari, and on Sunday we have a pancake breakfast to raise money to buy a new Ferrari for this person. I'm sure you would all come with open wallets. No, of course not. So what could he possibly mean by this? Because no society could function that way. He means that charity, caring about others begins by taking their pain seriously. By taking the things that they say is suffering for them, not that you decide is suffering, but that they say is a hardship, and taking it seriously. If we really want to be a kahal, a community, a tzibor, then it's our job to look exactly at those whose suffering we can't understand, those whose lives make no sense to us, and do our best to see back past what is presented and see their truth in the background. Over the last 18 months, we have experienced radical aloneness. However you have managed during this pandemic, if you were literally alone in your house, or if you had a house full of children, I promise that alone is what you felt. Either by trying to entertain and manage the household, or by just wanting to see another human. And one of that has caused us to know the truth of this sentence, Al tifrosh min hatzibor, don't separate ourselves from the community. And it demands that we take action as best we can. That we listen to Rabban Gamliel and we share exactly our Istani self. Share the part that is the wimp, the part that is delicate, the part that is vulnerable. And it demands that we listen to Rabbi Akiva and reach out to the other and try to take their truth, their pain, their suffering, the thing that we don't understand, and make it part of our lives too. If, as individuals, we can do both of those things, we will continue to create a place where people feel it is their community, their home, a place where they feel safe and whole, a place where we each feel heard, where growth, where greatness is possible. We will create the kind of community that we won't have to remind everyone not to separate themselves from, but which each of us, and perhaps everyone, will want to be a part of. In 5782, I hope each of us can see our proverbial Zoom boxes, to know ourselves and share, and to know the other and learn. Shana Tova.